Well, Hanford has 200 square miles of contaminated groundwater below the site there, and that is spreading over time because the contaminants in the soil are leaking at a constant rate into the into the groundwater.
Tonight, for the first time, sick Hanford workers speak out after getting exposed to toxic chemical vapors at the nuclear facility. An unprecedented string of unknown chemical vapor exposures has sent more than 24 workers to the hospital or the doctor since mid-March. And as King 5's Susanna Frame reveals in her ongoing investigation, Hanford's dirty secrets, the workers say the company line on their health status isn't the whole truth.
Uranium-238 is one of many isotopes of uranium. There are only 3 natural ones, and they occur throughout the universe like fairy dust. And uranium is made in very energetic and violent star processes where other atoms are smashed together in a kind of a snowball, and there is tremendous amounts of energy in the nucleus.
As 6 Hanford workers rolled into the ER in the last 3 weeks, sick after inhaling unknown vapors, and 20 more off to a doctor, their employer sent out public statements. The government contractor, Washington River Protection Solutions, or WRPS, said employees reported throat and nasal irritation and headaches. But good news, every worker had been checked out and released to return to work. The Hanford On-Site Medical Center, run by another government contractor, deemed every single patient A-OK to get back on the job.
That is misleading. We found the situation is far more serious than the feds and its contractors are letting on. All of the employees were not and still are not back to work, and many have symptoms far worse than an irritation.
I know this sounds incredible to people, but there are 40 miles of unlined trenches at Hanford, if you stretch them end to end, into which our federal government, your government, was dumping radioactive waste from nuclear weapons production and its own reactors until the year 2004, when we put those pictures on air and in our campaign literature for Initiative 297.
I felt kind of dizzy, like almost, like I couldn't walk.
It's just like I can't get a good deep breath. It's like a real shallow breath all the time.
Steve Ellingson and Becky Holland are veteran Hanford workers in good standing. When we sat down with them last week, neither was back to work, and both were fighting off serious symptoms.
It was hard for me to get my nose to stop bleeding.
Right before coming to the interview, a doctor cauterized Becky's nose to stop a week's worth of nosebleeds, and Steve spent all of the day before throwing up.
This is probably the most dangerous stuff on the planet ever. Very, very small quantities of this waste. And it's been said that a Dixie cup full of this waste in a crowded restaurant, everyone would be dead in the restaurant inside of an hour.
I was coughing so hard that it would start the gag reflex and I was throwing up.
How worried are you?
If you'd asked me this a week ago, I would have said, it's probably going to go away. Now I'm getting worried because this is 2 weeks and it's not better. Yesterday was the worst day I've had. So, I don't know. I'm getting worried that this may be the way I am the rest of my life.
Part of the worry? None of the exposed workers knows exactly what's gotten inside their bodies. They all work in what are called tank farms, right above the underground nuclear waste storage tanks, holding millions of gallons of the deadliest material on the planet.
Even the amount that would fit on the leg of a fruit fly is considered a problem dose, and that's happened at Hanford. Fruit flies have landed on contaminated materials and then flown off to go to the lunchroom and deposit contamination on food and on tables and whatnot, and they've had to evacuate a 20-acre area at the Hanford site because of hot fruit flies and wasps.
A lot of sense, and sometimes these dollars, they go to projects having little or nothing to do with the public good. Things like fruit fly research in Paris, France. I kid you not.
Do you believe that? Do you believe those stupid scientists?
During 4 decades of plutonium production at the site for the country's nuclear weapons program, hundreds of chemicals were used in the process. Lethal substances such as butanol, formaldehyde, mercury, and nitrous oxide. Remember the woman we saw going into the ER? That was Becky Holland, who's worried about all those unknowns since that day.
If you don't know what you're exposed to, you don't know what you can expect.
Studying stupid fruit flies? Fruit flies! We should obviously take away that fruit fly studying money. The fruit flies don't need it.
So this waste in these tanks is very dangerous in small quantities, and it has another feature, which is it's dangerous for very, very long periods of time. Bush administration obviously has a war or two to pay for. They're cheaping out on protecting public health and safety at the Hanford site. At this point, intend to empty one tank per year. But do the math. 170 tanks left to go to empty out. Over 100 years to empty out the tanks at Hanford. I mean, no way will those tanks last that long. I mean, one small earthquake out there could spell disaster for this region.
In the future, what kind of, I have these symptoms today, what am I going to have tomorrow? Or what am I going to have in 5 years?
So I want you to remember something. If you don't remember anything else tonight, there is no safe level of radiation, period.
Well, the WRPS president, Dave Olson, has assured the workers, your safety is my primary concern as we cope with these events. Not everyone is buying it.
The lack of concern is discouraging to me.
Once out of the hospital, Becky Holland visited that clinic run by the company HPMC. After listing off her symptoms, nosebleeds, intense headaches, sweats, and shaking, what did the HPMC provider do? Handed over a pain reliever, a cough drop, and a clearance to return to work.
I was offended. Almost like, you're making all this up. Here's some Tylenol and a throat lozenge. Now get to work.
I think you said the Hanford was getting for cleanup $2 billion a year?
Yes.
And I think that's what we spend per day on the war in Iraq?
Yeah, that's about right. We like to say that they spend that by breakfast in Iraq.
And as Steve Ellingson deals with burning lungs and nonstop coughing,
I'm sorry.
using inhalers and narcotics to cope, HPMC gave him an official cleared to work document, but he hasn't gotten much more from his company or the federal government.
Has anyone from the federal government called and asked, how are you doing, Steve?
No one.
One of the most serious abuses of human rights has come through the Pentagon's development of, production of, and use of depleted uranium munitions. These munitions have created an unending toll of casualties wherever they've been used. That the mere use of such munitions constitutes an offense against humanity. We're talking about something that will never go away.
None.
All of the exposed workers we've talked to are waiting for answers. What toxins did they inhale? What's in store for their health? In the meantime, these two have taken an unusual step. With Hanford's long-standing culture of secrecy and documented retaliation, few speak out. But with 50 years of experience between them, Steve Ellingson and Becky Holland say the time for change is now.
I think that the truth should be the truth. I don't think you should tell people that everybody's fine. They're all back to work, it's all okay. That place has got some dangerous stuff. And if other people, if it's going to save people by us saying something, I'd sure like to see people get, a better deal. I know I don't want to be like this.
This is an aluminum model of one tank round that's fired by an Abrams tank. This is aluminum. If this was actual, this thing would be over 10 pounds of solid uranium. We know contaminated with plutonium, neptunium, and americium. You fire one of these rounds, 40% breaks up into dust and oxides that be inhaled, ingested, absorbed, contaminate air, water, and soil. The United States Army Environmental Policy Institute, which is co-located here, confirmed that in their 1995 report. They stated, quote, there is no way to reduce the toxicity of uranium munitions. And they ignore it and continue today.
First of all, I'd like to mention that DU, depleted uranium, had a prior name, and it was DOLRAM. All the military manuals refer to it as DOLRAM, D-U-L-L-R-A-M, which is depleted uranium, low-level radioactive material. Well, they so eloquently remove the LLRAM and just call it depleted uranium now, and remove the low-level radiation part of it, uniquely enough. I don't know how they got to go hide that part. I don't know where the science was that allowed them to take those last four parts of the acronym off.
And late this afternoon, we got statements from the U.S. Department of Energy and their contractors. They all said their number one priority is the health and safety of the employees. And WRPS, the employer out there, says it's not them, but the on-site medical clinic that decides when their workers can get back to duty. And you can read their full statements online at king5.com.
So what is the health of all these people, all of these workers who have been seeing the doctor?
Well, the two that, had the bravery to speak out are still too sick to go to work. Steve, he's still struggling to breathe, and he's coughing, and Becky still has a really bad headache. But her biggest concern, this is a scary one, she's not thinking clearly. She says she's forgetting a lot of things, and that's really frightening to her. And we should make it clear they aren't the only ones. I've talked to others who say their lungs are burning, they don't feel right, but they've been cleared to work, and so they're out on the job. And, of course, we wish them all a speedy recovery.
All right. Susanna, thank you very much.
It's been against the law for decades for a municipal government to dump in municipal garbage in unlined landfills, but our federal government thinks it's okay for radioactive waste, even though it seeps right out of those trenches, and that stuff is all moving through the soil to the Columbia River. What they're not telling the public is that they also deliberately dumped out of the high-level nuclear waste tanks in the 1950s and 1960s billions of gallons of liquids into the soil, and it is very, very toxic. It is radioactive. It includes uranium that with half-lives of hundreds of thousands of years, and plutonium, and technetium-90, and strontium-90, and technetium-99, and all sorts of chemicals as well. And it's a witch's brew of deadly wastes, and it's all moving towards our lifeblood, the Columbia River.
And instead, we will spend that fruit fly studying money on stuff that does need studying, like autism. I mean, we've learned a lot about autism from the research that's already been done on it. Like we learned how that protein, norexin, could be a genetic risk factor for autism. Yeah, that was fascinating. We learned about that by studying fruit flies. Darn those scientists confounding our politics again!
Because we know that the blood donor system has been contaminated. We know that the organ donor system is contaminated. If you have a returning soldier coming from this battlefield, and what they like to do in the military is they like to do command-directed blood donors. The whole commander will say, hey, everybody go down to Red Cross today, go to the gym, give them some blood, and you can have the rest of the day off. All right, we get the day off. Soldier loves a day off. So he goes down and gives up the blood, but the blood is contaminated, and then the blood goes into the blood donor system. And then you want to get a kidney from a healthy little 21-year-old who just returned from the combat field, but the kidney is the most exposed organ to these heavy metals because the fluids are pushing them through to excrete and like that, and they just rip through these organs. This is going to be around long after even the human experience. They had no idea that these particles were so small that they were going through their filters. They were breathing them and they were ingesting them, and these soldiers have alpha-emitting particles lodged in their lungs and all over their body, and the qualitative result or the end result is that they've had children that were born with deformities, incredible deformities.
Some people have described it that we will be at war with Iraq till the end of Earth because we cannot turn off the weapons that we used against Iraq. This is the time test. You have to be able to stop the weapons at the end of the war. Depleted uranium has a half-life of 4.5 million years, so we are at war with Iraq for the end of time.
This concludes part 538,000 in a 2 million part series cataloging the course of human existence. For more, keep